Good evening. My name is PJ Capozzi. I'm Superintendent of Schools for Meridian CUSD 223.
Tim DeVries, board member.
What we're attempting to do tonight is to run through the agenda for the October Board of Education meeting that took place last week. Run through some highlights for you so that if you were not able to attend the meeting, you can still stay abreast as to what's taking place in the district. As a disclaimer, I was personally not at the meeting, which is very unusual for a superintendent not to be at a board meeting, but I had a family health issue. So the board is perfectly able to conduct business without the superintendent there, just as not normal practice or protocol. So this video is being taped after the Finance Committee meeting, which took place on October 5th. So I want to run through some major highlights that took place during the meeting. The agenda was not abundantly full, but wanted to go through a couple things in terms of what we did. There was a recognition of service. We had an incident that took place during one of our freshman volleyball games where a staff member took ill, and there was an emergent situation. We had two people come to her aid, and we wanted to recognize them, Kim Fleming and Alicia Eastman. So we had publicly recognized them for coming to the aid of one of our staff members. It didn't matter that it was a staff member, but just a great amount of courage and heart for people to come and provide first aid while we waited for first responders and did a great deed for our district. So we took the time to recognize them at the meeting.
And also one of those people that we did recognize did make a recommendation for us to maybe add some more equipment to the facilities and stuff like that. So we took that in consideration, and we will have that, I'm sure.
Yeah, and so the one of the recommendations was that a lot of times if somebody is in a state where they need CPR or resuscitation, that they can sometimes, while the person's delivering CPR, can sometimes vomit or produce other type of bloodborne pathogens that we wouldn't want to be communicable to each other. So the recommendation was that we kind of had mouth guards. That's one thing. We do have mouth guards. We had them in place, but instead of being readily accessible with our first aid equipment, they were with our AED machines. So this is something that we communicated better, so that if a situation like this occurs again, that we'll be able to provide those people providing service a better protection. Another thing that we report each month now, which is part of our board policies, we go through Freedom of Information Acts and what we receive as requests, and then the amount of work that it takes us to complete those. So we had 3 FOIA requests, which resulted in the transference of literally this month probably thousands of pages of documents. That the good news for us this month is that they were all documents that pre-existed, so it was simply putting a bunch of attachments into an email and sending them on. But not only is it our policy to continue to update this, but it's good just to let the public and board know that as these FOIA requests come up, we don't have the ability to have a FOIA officer, which is paid, so that just is additional work that falls on already stressed and strapped staff. 3 other items that were part of my report, again, which was delivered on my behalf by Mr. Smith and through different types of communication, was that we were able to deliver and examine the audit this year. Everyone knows that there was financial difficulties in the district, and there are some procedures and processes that need to get better over the last couple of years. So we're really happy with the audit findings this year. Every time you have an audit of a $17 million budget, there's going to be a handful of findings. This year there are 5 findings, 2 of which were corrected mid-year, so they said you corrected them, but since we found them, we have to report on it. So there are really 3 things that were left that had to be detailed. 1 had to do with overall production, and then 2 had to deal with a management of a federal grant. The one that had to do with overall production is that we got cited for actually running a fiscally conservative foods program, which created revenue for the district as opposed to breaking exactly even. So that is like the opposite of mismanagement. So when you think of an audit finding, that's generally what you think of. It's actually the opposite, but by federal guideline, that has to be an audit finding. The other 2 had to do with the management of a title grant. We paid one person's salary out of that didn't qualify, and we submitted one report a couple of days late. So both of those will get improved, but if you look at our audits, which are public record, this is a drastic improvement to where we've been in the past. We're pretty happy with that performance.
Yeah, usually had multiple lines and starting to clean up the house.
Yeah, starting to get things back in order. One other item that we went over to just touch base on is winter weather procedures. It's getting to, while it was balmy out the last handful of days, it is November, and around the corner is winter weather. And so we just wanted to affirm our procedures What we believe in as a district is that we make our own decisions. Obviously, we confer with other districts, but we don't necessarily need to follow anyone else's lead, that we can make decisions based on our own. So we went over how we make those decisions, why we make them, just to make sure that we all believe in the process that we use. And so what we've decided is that wind chill is projected to be below 30 degrees leads to a cancellation of school. Anything between 20 and 30 is superintendent's discretion. Generally, in that case, we try to push through unless we see something else that's compounding that effect. And then in terms of our road safety, we have a pretty detailed arrangement that exists between our Buildings and Grounds Department, Transportation, and road commissioners. And so we set up that relationship every year and review that. And if any one of those components feel it's not safe for kids to travel to school, then we make the decision to err on the side of safety. That's something that I know that it's one of the, whenever I make that decision, and that's a superintendent decision. Some people are really happy and some people are upset about it. So we know it's not something we're going to make with that people believe 100% of people feel that we made the right decision. However, we do think it's something that is worth discussing collaboratively to make sure we're on the same page. And at the end of the day, we make those decisions with student safety in mind.
I find it interesting that you guys usually start about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning to start making those decisions.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where we start school so early that, by the time that we're on the road, we don't want to make the decision after we pick any kid up. And at the end of the day, we're providing a service to the community, so we need to make sure that we make those decisions and give parents as much lead time as possible. And that's why you'll see our district will go ahead and make those decisions the night before if there's clear forecast saying it's going to be X or Y, where other districts have a different philosophy. Not that ours is right and theirs is wrong, but that just happens to be the philosophy that we've adopted. We didn't have a great deal of public comment at the meeting, and we moved on to talk about our health, life, safety process and the financing options that are coming with that. If you guys have watched these, this has been a constant theme on the agenda, I believe, since the last spring break, maybe with the 1 month it wasn't discussed. So it's continually a thing that we are investigating. We'll have a much more detailed report as to the funding scenarios we're considering for health, life, safety on our recap of the Finance Committee meeting. On both the Finance Committee meeting and on this agenda, all the documents that are leading to helping us make that decision were attached so the public can consume them if they choose.
Board Book is a great tool for that.
And for anyone that is not familiar with Board Book that's just consuming this off of Facebook, if you go onto the Meridian webpage and look under Board of Education, there's a tab that says Board Book. And every meeting that we've had since Board Book's been in place, which has been multiple years, you can see the agenda. And what we do a lot currently, and we've done over the last 2 years, is any document that fuels the discussion, we've attached to it so that the public can be aware of what is taking place in the district. One action item that was on this meeting was the approval of a risk management plan. And understanding risk management plan is somewhat easy and somewhat complex. Essentially what we do is work through a complex process of surveying staff in order to figure out exactly what percentage of their time takes place within risk management services. The reason we do that is because whatever that percentage equates to means that we can fund that portion of that person's salary out of the tort fund, which is Fund 80 for us. The advantage and disadvantage of that is that there's an unlimited capacity to fund in tort, so that whatever we're spending in terms of risk management, then we can continue to bring that amount of revenue in. The downside is obviously we don't want to increase taxes on our tax base. And so what we do is each year we look at our risk management plan. Every other year we go through the study again. And then we determine how much money we could be levying. Our choice this year, we levied for $500,000. We can levy for substantially more than that based on this risk management plan. So as we approach levy season coming up, then we look at our risk management plan. And this year we looked at what we did last year, just affirmed the same plan.
That's interesting. We probably could levy a lot heavier in tort, but we try to stay consistent with the tax rates and try to do that.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's an opportunity for us. If we're in desperate need of revenue, that's an avenue that we can explore as long as property taxes aren't frozen. But it's a choice that we make to not maximize that revenue because of promises we made during the referendum. We also adopted a tentative levy. The levy conversation is going to persist from October to November to December when it's voted on. There'll be many press releases and a public hearing on our levy. But again, that establishes the tax rate. Our goal is to try to keep it as consistent as possible, as we had talked about previously. 4 other items I want to mention very quickly for you. One is that we signed a contract agreement to stay with our same auditing firm. We were able to lock in at a very sound rate. We will now have been working with them for over 7 years, and our total increase in rate over that 7 years will be $500. So we're pleased with that. I'm sorry, $700 over that 7 years. Annually, we have to renew our insurance plans. So we use a vendor that goes out and shops our district data through many different insurance firms to try to secure the best possible rates for ourselves while providing the same type of service and benefits for our employees. What we have found this year is we were able to get rate freezes or decreases for life insurance, for vision, and for hearing, while incurring a 9% increase in our overall medical coverage. That 9% increase is a function of a lot of different things in the economy, and it's a cost that we can't really control. We actually had a really good claims year and still saw that type of increase. So that's one of the things as we talk about when we talk about levies and revenues, that there's costs that continue to increase that we have no control over. Healthcare is a major factor.
And you budgeted how much for that? You budgeted 10% for that?
We budgeted a 10% increase, so we're okay. Additionally, we budgeted a 10% rate for that, so we're comfortable. Additionally, the insurance year doesn't match our fiscal year, so even though it's a 9% increase, it's a 9% increase over 8 months, so it's actually more like a 6 or 7% increase. So we budgeted appropriately and projected appropriately, thinking that a health care increase such as this would occur. Our 2 last items included approving a farm lease. We've gone through a very long, transparent, open process in terms of taking the additional acreage that the district owns and trying to create as much revenue off of it as possible, and opening that up to our community members. So we accepted an agreement, and we'll be working with Heinz Farms for the next 4 years. And lastly, just to conclude, I wanted to say a big thank you. We received an anonymous donation of $17,000 to work toward bringing in an additional wireless laptop cart for the high school that we should have in place by second semester. So obviously I'd love to tell you who to thank, but I can't by the nature of an anonymous donation. But want to note that we accepted that. The role in that is that even though it was a very targeted donation by board policy, the board has to accept the donation in general and then can route it to the area that the donor wanted. In almost all cases, that's exactly what happens, but it has to roll through a board policy, and that's why there's an action item on it.
And happy that people are still willing to do that. That's awesome.
That's a recap of our October board meeting. As always, with any questions, feel free to call or email me. Also, we referenced the resource, which is Board Book. Anything that we talked about at the meeting is going to be explained in a great amount of detail there. Thank you. Make it a great day.